12:21 p.m., so we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. The court is in recess. Officer Chambers.
Back to Law and Crime Live, everyone. I'm your host, Caroline Polisi, and a special hello to our Sirius XM radio listeners today. We are live in the courtroom of the Gloria Williams sentencing hearing. She posed as a nurse. She stole a baby from a hospital and raised that girl as her own. It was just discovered last year. She's now pleaded guilty to 2 charges. 1 charge of felony kidnapping and interference with custody, which is a felony 3 charge. Now the question is, what punishment will the judge sentence her to? Williams is asking for between 0 and 22 years in prison. She could face that much for this kidnapping charge, and 0 to 5 on the interference charge. I'm joined with a special guest today, Kenya Johnson. She is a current prosecutor out of Atlanta, Georgia. Kenya, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Caroline.
So, I mean, this is really quite a unique case for us here on the network. It's rare that, you know, one feels such really empathy for the defendant in this instance. What's your take?
Very moving testimony, but this gives us a little bit into her feelings. The real question is this the same person before you on the stand today that pled guilty to her offenses? Is this the same person that did all of these heinous acts, posed as a nurse, snuck into the hospital, stole this baby, and kept it quiet? I can tell you that just the fact that it's out is a very big burden, I'm sure, that she's had to live with. But the judge should want to hear from her parents, the impact that's been on their life, because they have struggled to have a relationship with their daughter, because the daughter now still loves the woman that raised her. So it's a very complicated circumstance, because if the defendant goes away for a long time, she then hurts her daughter. And does it make her life any better by her mother going away? Does it improve the relationship with her biological parents? These are questions that the judge will have to answer.
Right, and it's a question sort of mitigating the damage to the innocence in this case. Of course, Shanara Mobley, who is Kamaya's biological mother, did take the stand yesterday. That was very heartfelt testimony as well. Now, the question is, in whose best interest are we going to make this decision? We also saw the interaction between this child and the defendant. Clearly, there is love between the two. What's your sense of how the sentencing judge is going to go about making this decision?
Well, the best approach should be how to make as many parties whole as possible. We're talking almost 20 years that the family suffered, not knowing what happened to their daughter. We have a young lady that is growing up without a sense of identity and knowing what's real and what's not real. And all she knows is the one person that unconditionally showed her love, which is the one person that harmed her the most. So the judge has to balance many different interests. And what is the punishment? This is a guilt that Ms. Williams has had to live with for a very long time. I can tell you that she has not had an easy life dealing with this. So lots of things to consider.
And what is your sense there? You see on your screen, beautiful, beautiful baby stolen from the hospital. This defendant posed as a nurse, took that baby from the hospital, raised it as her own. Heartbreaking story. You know, so I've kind of changed my tune a little bit. I initially felt very empathetic towards this defendant. I felt she had a lot of heartfelt testimony on the stand. Towards the end of that testimony there, when she was talking about, you know, wanting to help people, I mean, it got a little bit much. What's your sense of sort of the sincerity of her remorse for the act? She did state that if she had to do it all over again, she would not do it. Do you believe her?
Of course she would say that. I've seen this many times as a prosecutor. Often defendants find religion in difficult circumstances. It could be sincere. It may not be sincere, but she's fighting for the next 22 years of her life. She's fighting for some semblance of the life that she's known. It doesn't impress me that, of course, she's now changed her tune and she wants to help everyone and be a philanthropist. I get that part, but the question is what will make the most parties the most whole at this point?
Right. And just for our viewers, she stated she wants to help others. She's not the same person she was 20 years ago. And she referenced it that she just has this, she's a good person. She just did this, quote, one little thing. Now, if I were a judge that sort of characterization, an effort to minimize the crime, the heinous crime, really would not sit well with me. So I wonder if the judge is going to admonish her for that statement. It's never good in sentencing when defendants try to minimize their conduct. Do you agree?
Absolutely. She did try to minimize it because it's not one little thing. It's one huge thing at a major impact. But the judge may also consider that she pled guilty and she is accepting responsibility without a long drawn out trial that would certainly traumatize the family even further. So there is a little bit of credit for taking responsibility. However, her best bet is to continue to remain as humble as possible, as helpful as possible, and to acknowledge the gravity of the situation to which she alone caused.
Right, absolutely. Kenya, always good to hear your insights. We're covering a lot of cases here on the network. I want to turn now to our case out of Knoxville, Tennessee. William Riley Gaul, he's a former Maryville College football player, allegedly stalked and killed his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. She was a high school cheerleader, and this occurred in November of 2016. We are live in that courtroom now. We're covering that as well. But I want to get your take, Kenya. Look, the defense here is not, it's not a whodunit. They are admitting that he fired the shot. What else can you do if you're the defense attorney representing Riley Gaul in this case?
So this is a tactic that I've also seen before, where the defense will admit to something, plead to some of the charges, but then back up and say, but I didn't do that major thing. I'm a drug dealer, but I'm not a murderer. And so sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't worked, but it's certainly a strategy to try to mitigate and prove to the judge that I do admit to doing one thing, but I didn't do the other thing.
Right. And I'm just hearing word from our producers that we are live in that courtroom, so we want to take our viewers right there. We don't want to miss a second. Let's go live. All right, that's expert testimony. She's on the stand there in the case of William Riley Gaul. Very strange case out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Remember, he is that star football player allegedly stalked and killed his 16-year-old ex-girlfriend, Emma Walker. She was a high school cheerleader at the time. This took place in November of 2016. Again, I'm joined via Skype with Kenya Johnson, a prosecutor. Kenya, when you see a case like this, the question is this sort of youthful, I don't know what you would call it, but can the defense use the youth card to their advantage, or is this something that they really can't mitigate in this circumstance?
So we have a defendant who's 18 years old and a victim who was 16 years old. And so youthful missteps, oftentimes people need first and second chances. But anytime there's a loss of life in such aggressive behavior, that sort of takes you out to the knew or should have known area. And so as a young man, he should have known that this behavior had really crossed the line, that he was being very aggressive in his actions. And it always troubles me when I see cases with young people, because yes, it's true that their brains aren't all the way developed and they may not have the best rationale in long-term thinking, but he was at the point and age that he should have known that this behavior was completely inappropriate in society's standards.
Right. So Kenya, I'm hearing word that we are actually going to go back live. Remember, we're covering a lot of trials here. We're going back live to the Williams courtroom. Gloria Williams, remember, she's accused of stealing a baby from a hospital and posing as a nurse. Let's go live to that courtroom right now, her sentencing hearing. All right, that's it for the testimony of Gloria Williams in her sentencing hearing for the kidnapping of a child that she stole from a hospital and raised that child as her own. It was discovered last year. Some very tearful, heartfelt testimony there, tugging at the heartstrings. There really are no winners in this case. I'm joined via Skype here with our special guest. Kenya, thank you for being back with us live. What is your take on this testimony? I mean, she's off the stand, or they're having their lunch break. What do you think is going through the mind of the judge?
You know, you could almost hear the frustration in the prosecutor's voice as he described how outrageous this crime was. And what the judge may be thinking is that this isn't just a one incident occurrence with one set of events. This is basically an 18-year crime to which she made the conscious decision each and every day for it to be a continuous crime. And when the prosecutor referenced the selfish love of Miss Williams, she talks about how true love and how much she really loved her daughter that she who she believed to be her daughter. There's lots of questions on her definition of love and the sacrifices that she made when she really didn't have to. Every single day she could have turned this child in. She could have left the child at anywhere to turn the child into the police. So this lets me know that every single day up until the day she was discovered, she consciously committed this crime.
That's right. And, I think she stated the reason that she didn't turn herself in was out of fear, right? That was at least the line that she was giving up on the stand there. Can you take us back at all? Did you get any insight into her mental state? She's stating she's a changed person now, over the course of the past 16 months that she's been incarcerated. She's turned to God, apparently. What do you think was her mental state at the time that she actually committed this crime? What was happening in her life?
Well, as studies have shown from other similar situations, it's usually a situation where the person could not conceive or was having a major trauma in their life, relationship issues, wanted someone to love them just for them. And there is some sort of dementia that causes you to act in this way that you would have to or take ownership and continue this lifelong lie of holding this child that doesn't belong to you. As she stated, she thought every moment, I believe for the entire 18 years, that someone would put their hand on her shoulder and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, can I talk to you?" So she was constantly living under fear. And what drove her to act this way had to be some sort of trauma that she was dealing with to allow her to think that this type of activity was okay.
Right. And we heard, again, a lot of pushback, initially when it was just the defense speaking to her, letting her tell her story. It was quite, you could have some empathy for her when you talk about sort of the loving relationship that she actually did have with this child who ultimately was not her own. But then once we heard the cross-examination, they used the term brainwash, which I thought was a brilliant move. And you heard, of course, Gloria Williams say, well, that's your word, not mine. She would not characterize sort of the course of the 18 years that she spent with this child as an act of brainwashing. But I mean, really, when you think about it, that's what it is. She was living a lie.
She was. She essentially brainwashed her daughter, would-be daughter, to think that she was her mother and that this was the life that she was to lead. And so all of the ways that she tried to stop her child from getting access to her Social Security and for the truth to come out, all of the deceptive ongoing methods that she utilized every day to hide the secret shows a very calculating person, a very intentional person, someone who is aware of the consequences of their actions. So while on the direct, you began to feel that connection with her and almost some sympathy, but on the cross-examination, they brought it back into place and reminded you how egregious this crime was.
Right. Again, on that brainwash back and forth, Gloria Williams saying true love is not a lie. Now, the question is whether or not the judge is going to believe that. Remember, she faces a maximum of 22 years on that kidnapping charge. Kenya, thank you so much for your insights. I want you to stick around. I want to play a clip of Gloria Williams just in case our viewers missed any portion of it, because it is riveting testimony. We are going to talk about it when we get back. All right, that was some testimony earlier in the day today by Gloria Williams. She is in her sentencing hearing for the abduction from a hospital of a baby girl whom she then raised for really the entirety of that child's into adulthood, essentially. She's testifying there. That clip is she's talking with at the hospital. She's talking with the biological mother of the baby, Miss Mobley. I'm joined on set, or excuse me, I'm joined on Skype with Kenya Johnson. Kenya, I mean, it's hard to comprehend this crime. I mean, it's not a typical crime that we cover here on the network. Can you take us back, that 18 years ago, or however many years ago it was at this point, to that day in the hospital? What is Gloria Williams essentially describing for us on the stand happened that day?
Well, we finally hear a bit of her mindset. She says that her mindset wasn't logical and that it just wasn't right. And so what she did was she went into a hotel went into a hospital dressed as a nurse, and she befriended a young mother, found out that the mother had just had a baby and they were around the same age. She targeted this child, stalked the child, and then devised a plan to which she could grab the child, put the baby in a knapsack. She denied that it was a duffel bag, but some sort of carrying case, and then she walked out of the hospital. She says that she knew that at any point in time someone was going to tap her and say, "What's in your bag?" And this was a baby that no one heard crying. It just goes to show that she was afraid to lose her family. She had already lost her two sons. She had had a miscarriage. She was suffering abuse. So once again, we're hearing the defense try to come up with mitigating factors, but what we're not hearing is her being very adamant about what she did wrong. She acknowledges that back then I did wrong, but she's not talking about a week before I was discovered, I was very, very much still wrong. And those are the things that we're just not hearing from her testimony.
Right. And Kenya, I mean, you said it right there. The idea of taking a baby out of a hospital in a duffel bag, I mean, that really hits home because obviously that would endanger the child. And we heard her there again try to mitigate, saying that she thought that bringing this baby home would end the abuse that she was in her relationship. Now, ultimately, she says she came to her senses that it wasn't fair to that child ultimately to have an abusive partner around. But when you think about it, taking a child in a duffel bag out of a hospital home to a known abuser, it's mind-blowing.
It is. She talks about this pure love that she had, but she recognized that the daughter would be in a bad situation without ever thinking that the daughter was without her biological parents and was already in the worst possible situation. And so it seems as if she did have some afterthought, some reasoning, but to the extent of that reasoning, we're discovering in her testimony.
Right. Kenya, thank you so much, as always, for your insights. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back very shortly. All right, that was testimony earlier today from Gloria Williams, the woman who pleaded guilty to stealing a baby from the hospital and raising that child as her own. This is her sentencing hearing. She pleaded guilty to the charges, so we didn't get a trial. I'm joined via Skype with Kenya Johnson, a prosecutor. Kenya, we heard there that clip was testimony about how Miss Williams kept this packed baby bag by her door because she lived in fear, really, of getting caught at any moment. She didn't think ultimately this would happen, but she raised this child into adulthood. Tell us a little bit more what more you know about this case. Again, since we did not get a trial in this case, I mean, it's a fascinating story. What do we know?
So the troubles of this family, as in Alexis and her biological family, have been well documented. The biological parents have reached out to her. They are no longer together, and they've attempted to have a relationship with Alexis using her birth name that they gave to her. Alexis prefers to be referred to as Alexis because that's the only name that she's known from her, whom she thought was her mother.
Of course.
Subsequently, there have been issues with the parents, the biological parents, feel that Alexis's communication with Gloria Williams is improper, that Alexis should be angry and she should be on the biological parent's side. But unfortunately, Alexis is tied to her, to Ms. Williams, and she views her as her mother. She knows that she has a biological mother, and they're trying to have a relationship, but now that biological mother feels betrayed. And so they have had lots of problems in trying to reunite their family, and the advice that a psychologist recently gave Alexis, as well as Alexis's biological mother, is simply that you're going to have to learn to all live together, because clearly Alexis wants a relationship with Gloria Williams, and the biological family wants a relationship with her, and Alexis wants a relationship with the biological parents. However, this is going to be a threesome now, and everybody has to get used to it, because Gloria Williams is mommy number one, biological mother is mommy number two, and they have to learn to coexist.
Wow. wow. I mean, it's mind-boggling, really, to think about that type of situation. Of course, no fault of Alexis's, obviously. It seems obvious that she would want to continue a relationship with the only mother that she's ever known for her entire life. So, I mean, I understand that. I also, it's clearly, you know, one could see the point of the biological mother feeling like, you know, they should not have a relationship. But the fact is, you know, that's what Alexis knew. I mean, I'm choosing to call her Alexis because, as you noted, that is the only name she ever knew. She would like to be called that. Such a unique, fascinating case. I really appreciate your insights, Kenya. Thanks for being with us. Please come back to the Law and Crime Network and give us your excellent commentary again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and let's keep this family in our prayers. They've got a lot of healing to go.
Absolutely. Right now, guys, I'm going to throw to some more clips of the Florida versus Gloria Williams sentencing hearing. This is testimony earlier today in this sentencing hearing. Remember, Gloria Williams stole a baby from a hospital, raised that child as her own. It's an incredible story. Take a listen.